Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me today, I have Professor Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, CIAS, as well as Professor David Awurawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Nigeria's January 2024 inflation rate has increased to 29.90% relative to the December 2023 inflation rate, which was 28.92%. Looking at the movement, the January 2024 headline inflation rate showed an increase of 0.98 percentage points when compared to the December 2023 headline inflation rate. Similarly, on a year-on-year basis, the headline inflation rate was 8.08 percentage points higher compared to the rate recorded in January 2023, which was 21.82%. Food prices also rose sharply. The prices of staples like bread and yam rose as many shoppers sought more cost-effective alternatives to feed. January's food inflation figure was 35.41%. Dr. Franklin Ngwu is the director of Lagos Business School Public Sector Initiative and an associate professor of strategy, corporate governance, and risk management. He joins me now to dissect the key performance indicators from the latest inflation figures and the general economic situation in the country. Good to have you on This Day Live, Dr. Ngwu.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon and happy Sunday.
Thank you. Well, a rapidly depreciating Naira, rapidly rising inflation, food riots across the country, all of this in the face of measures that have been put in place by the Tinubu administration, both on the monetary side and also the fiscal side. Where did we get it wrong? Such that, since the Tinubu administration got there, instead of things going down or moderating, things are just getting worse. Where did we get it wrong?
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. You know that if you are doing national planning, you have to ask yourself, where are you as a country? Where do you want to go and how do we get there? So we know where we were when Tinubu got into government. And the question then is, where do we want to go as a country? So based on the policies implemented, some of the policies are good, some of the policies are not good, but the question is, were the policies well thought out, were they properly coordinated, and were they properly implemented? So just to analyze a little bit, so you have what is called recognition lack in policy implementation and execution. You now have what is called implementation. So you have to recognize there's a problem first, then you now have to implement, then you now have the impact, and then you now wait for the outcome. So if we look at the two key policies that we've implemented, one is removal of fuel subsidy, and the second one is floating of the Naira. In terms of removal of subsidy, we've all argued that subsidy should be removed, but it depends on the way the subsidy was removed. So more or less, we were told that it was based on courage that this subsidy has been removed, which is fine. Then you now come to issue of floating of Naira. We've all argued, even during PMB's regime, that Nigeria, based on all variables, based on all considerations, based on all factors, that there is no way we can float the Naira because we don't have the productive capacity to support a floating currency. So removal of subsidy can be managed, but floating Naira was a very, very bad policy. So what we've argued initially was for the government to do what we call managed floating, to say this is where Naira is supposed to be. Then the CBN can now intervene, as the case may be, based on market forces to now stabilize the Naira. But just floating the Naira, removal of subsidy, as the case may be. So the inflation that you're looking at, of course, during the PMB's regime and now, we've had the money supply has gone out for about over 50-something%. And when you now remove economic growth from the money supply, which is about 2-something% to about 51%, you have about 40-something%, which is coming from demand push inflation. And of course, when you now add insecurity, when you now add other factors, you find out the food prices are more or less going up. So in summary, the government, while they have good intentions, but the policies have not been properly thought through and they've not been properly implemented.
Okay, some policies are good, some are bad.
Yeah.
Even the ones that are good have not been properly implemented. And you talked about the floating of the Naira. The Naira has been devalued to the tune of about 50%.
More than.
Well, some people say 50%, some people say 40%. But what we know is that the Naira is on a free fall.
Yes.
And you are talking about floating the Naira. But government says it's a managed float. But will you recommend a return to a fixed exchange rate regime?
I think from the way things are going, before this new government, before they came in, the different scenarios revealed that Naira, the true value of Naira should be about between 680 and 750. So now that we are almost 1.6, some people say before Easter we're going to get to about 2,000. That is on a free fall. So it is time we recognize that we've made a mistake. And the government will come out plainly and say, we've made a mistake in this policy and we cannot continue. And say, so I am recommend that government must come out and say, Naira is, based on these scenarios, it should be around maybe between 680, 700 or 750 and say, this is what we want. And they will both official market and parallel market and insist that this must be done. But that must be accompanied with other factors. So if you use, let me just use one of the crude ways of determining fair value of the true value of Naira. So you look at, for example, our total money supply, which is about 78 or something like that trillion. And you look at our total exports, which is about 64 billion as of December. So if you do that, it gives you about 1,000 something. I'm talking about currently. But as at May or March last year, it was about 680, 700. But what is more interesting is that we can control both the denominator and the numerator, which means that we can reduce the money supply. We can also increase the exports. It means that if you manipulate these two factors, you can actually get a better value for Naira. So if you look at these factors very well, it means that the government, because the government has also a monopoly of violence and power, they can say this is what we want. And once we do it, because we know, me and you agree, that Naira cannot be at 1,600 to $1, or 1,700 to $1, 1,500. This is pure speculation.
But some people are saying, look, if you look at the official market rate and the parallel market, yes, the gap has closed. So the two rates are closer to each other. What's the implication of that for investments?
The implication is not a good, it's not, I mean, people, sometimes in economics, people just focus on economics. But I keep emphasizing that economics, politics, sociology, they are all highly related. You're talking about the society, you're talking about the policy of the environment, you're talking about the economics. That the two are together, and it's fine for investment. That means you can bring in and you can go out. But the question then is, will investors come in here when you have a free floating Naira and when you have the Naira going down? Yesterday evening, I had dinner with some people who are investing in Nigeria, who are not from Nigeria. One is from India, one is from Norway, and they are saying that this cannot continue. They cannot continue like this. So if you bring in something and you produce based on your calculations and everything, you're going to sell at 100 Naira. Before you know it, even the exchange rate has gone up. You can't even bring in more input. So it's not sustainable. So what I'm trying to say is that so even if you go back to PMB's regime, we were exchanging officially at 4 something, maybe 470, 480 as the case may be. And the free market was about 7 something. So we were working at that rate. So what happened? Why didn't the government try as much as possible to now move the official exchange rate closer to the parallel exchange rate, which is about 700 something or 800 something, which would have been actually manageable? But allowing the Naira and saying, oh, we are now adjusting the official exchange rate to now maybe move up to the black market rate, as the case may be, from an economic point of view, from my experience, is not sustainable.
Okay. We talked about food prices. You talked about sociology.
Yes.
And we've seen protests as a result of food insecurity across the country. People saying they are hungry. and the government has responded. But what I see is some sort of confusion. Can you explain, make sense out of the confusion? On one hand, they say they are releasing 102,000 metric tons of grains. Now, later we're told, well, they would import, in case there is a shortfall. Now government comes back and says, no, there will be no importation. At another point, we were told by the vice president that commodity exchange boards will be set up. And then again, government comes back again and says there will be no commodity boards to modulate prices and encourage competition. Then government says, oh, part of the problem is we have to protect our forests, and we will have forest rangers that can provide security. Why is it so difficult for them to make up their minds? Are commodity boards necessary? And why is it that they keep going back and forth on whether there should be importation of food or commodity boards or not? And, all these statements, we have enough food. It's just the pricing regime that is the problem.
As I earlier mentioned, there is what is called recognition lag. So you recognize that there's a problem. And you now say, okay, let's implement. And you now say, what is the impact? Remember that this government is an APC government. And we had PMB for 8 years. All the policies being announced now, we've had it before. Releasing of grain, importation, opening of this. So they are all reactive. They are not proactive. The only single one that is a bit proactive, which is also more of reactive than being proactive, that we are going to invest more on agriculture, we're going to plant more, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. There is no proper coordination, Dr. Abati. That's the honest truth. So if there is proper coordination, what we are supposed to be seeing now, right from last year, May was more or less, we are moving into rainy season. We're already in rainy season. So what did we do throughout last year? So, Tinubu took over in May last year. So if you get a job now, you'll be on probation for 6 months. And after 6 months, we'll now say you're doing well or you're not doing well. He's the chairman, chief executive of the country called Nigeria. So it's time for him to sit back and say, the people that I've appointed, how are they doing in terms of individual performance, in terms of team performance, in terms of country performance, in terms of sectoral performance, as the case may be. And those that are seen to be doing well will be encouraged and supported more. Those that are not doing well, it's now left for him as the chief executive to say, it's been good working with you, but we think that maybe you can work more as in a different capacity, or maybe you are not even good enough to work here. So let me bring it back to this issue of agriculture. For instance, where is the Minister of Agriculture? He's neither here nor there, as well as many of the ministers. So if we are proactive in addressing these issues, we are supposed to be hearing now to say, Ogun State, this is where you're going to be focusing on this farming season. Kwara State, this is what you're going to be focusing. Enugu, this is what you're going to be focusing. Adamawa, this is what you're going to be focusing. And this will be communicated across board. National Orientation Agency, we are not hearing anything from them. So if you notice what is going on, the focus is more or less on inflation, on finance, on CBN, but in terms of the real economy, not proper discussion is happening there. So my assessment of the confusion is that there is a need for the president to now rethink his team and say, what are we doing with this economy? And understand the seriousness of the situation and take it very, very serious. The chief of staff also needs to coordinate the economy, needs to help the president more in terms of coordinating the ministers to say, this is what we are supposed to do, and now also engage the public and engage the state governors as well. Somebody was asking, now that the state governors are getting more allocation, based on removal of subsidy, based on this, what are they doing with the money? Somebody has also said that once we receive the allocation, the exchange rate goes up. It means that once they get allocation, maybe some of the governors will go and buy foreign exchange and everything will go up. So, but of course, there is a book written by Professor Ositogbo, and the title is Development as Attitude. So all these things relate to leadership in terms of how do you signal, how do you coordinate, how do you supervise, how do you ensure that things work well. If I give you a little bit of overview, right from when we started in 1999, during OBJ's regime, we grew at about 7%. During Yar'Adua's regime, we grew at about 6%. Jonathan's regime at about 6% as well. But PMD's regime will grow about 1.something%. So the question is, what percentage does Tinubu wants Nigeria to grow? And then he has to take responsibility and ownership and leadership to now pivot Nigeria, shape Nigeria to be able to achieve it. And is it possible to achieve? The answer is yes. If you look at the fiscal policies, look at the monetary policies, the question is, how do you coordinate all these policies and ensure that the recognition lag, the implementation lag, the impact lag, and the outcome is as narrow as possible?
Okay, with regard to food prices, can government fix food prices in the face of what is going on in the country? And I bring that up because most recently, Femi Falana SAM went to court, and the court ruled that yes, there is a price control board, which is a creation of law, the Price Control Act of 2004, and that under that law, it is the responsibility of government, the Price Control Board, to fix prices of staples, of basic things like fish, like meat, like cereals, even of petroleum products, petrol, kerosene, vehicle spare parts, motorcycles. But there are some economists who have been saying, no, government cannot fix prices. But, the law says where government can fix prices just to protect the people. What do you think as an economist?
As an economist, of course, if there is market failure, government intervenes to correct the market failure. And if there is government failure, sometimes that's the reason why we say that the market can also come and help to correct the government failure. So in this case of government, people calling for government to fix prices or going to court, as the case may be, is a clear case of failure in governance. As an economist, it wouldn't be the appropriate thing to do. But because we are in a very disturbing and disappointing situation, that is the reason why we are calling the government to come and fix prices. What is supposed to happen is that we have reserves, food reserves in different parts of the country. If the prices are going up, the government will not come out directly to come and start fixing prices. What they will just do is to increase the supply. Because of course, food prices is a function of demand and supply. Mm-hmm. So once they release the supply, the price will moderate to the level they think that is acceptable. But when in a situation, we're not even doing what we are supposed to do as a government, and there is no proper production, and there is not adequate supply, and the demand is increasing, population is increasing, and suddenly we now go to court, suddenly we now say, government, come and fix the prices. I'm not sure it's is the way to go.
Okay, one of the policies you say people agree is okay, it's good, maybe not well implemented, is the removal of fuel subsidy. Now we are at a situation now where the National Association of Road Transport Owners, I think they just issued a circular that they've directed after a NEC meeting that their members should stop lifting petroleum products because, they can't sustain the business. And they are even appealing in the circular that I saw, to NUPENG to also support them and make sure that starting from tomorrow, nobody lifts fuel. So we face the possibility of fuel scarcity. In addition to organized labor, also saying because government did not honor the 16-point agreement, reached in October 2023, they've given strike notice. They're going to go on a warning strike. After the warning strike, if nothing happens, they say they will go on indefinite strike. Is there any ray of hope, in the horizon? Because it looks like on all fronts, all of them linked together, as you pointed out, things are just going from bad to worse. What can be done in the immediate term? In
terms of hope, there is so much hope. Nigeria is immensely blessed, endowed, and we have all it takes to do things to achieve a better outcome, a better economy. I just mentioned to you that in terms of Naira, for example, that if you look at a crude way of measuring Naira value is looking at total exports and then looking at money supply. So this is an area that we can control. So is there hope? Yes, there is so much hope. So what is required to do is to look at the monetary policies and say, what can we do to bring in more dollar? What can we do to have a better exchange rate? So I will itemize two, either monetary policy and fiscal policy. In the monetary policy, I've said, for foreign exchange, I've said, we need to come out and say, we cannot continue this free fall. Based on scenario, government needs to return on a fixed exchange rate for now and say, this is what we need to do. And then gradually say, okay, we are now moving into manage floating. We can say, okay, Naira is going to be at 700, 680, 800, as the case may be, and leave it at that. And the next thing is to say, okay, my account in UK, for example, what am I getting as interest rate? In other parts of the world, where Nigerians in diaspora, what are they getting as interest rate? Is there a possibility to say, how can we attract more money from these guys abroad by paying them a higher interest rate in domiciliary account or any other account that they can bring? But you need to signal that you're serious in doing that, in paying that. Pay the first month, the second month, the third month, so that people can start having signal. Once you do the first one, people who are holding dollars will start releasing the dollars and the thing will start coming down. But you must enforce it. But the government must also signal that they are committed to it. In terms of what we discussed before, that the governors are also changing the dollar, the Naira back to dollars, as the case may be. The federal government also needs to signal that they are prudent and they are serious in terms of the way they coordinate the policies, as the case may be. When you move to fiscal side, now that we are talking about insecurity across the land, and the president just quickly had a meeting with the governors, and they now start saying that we're going to create state police. That is very good. That is commendable. But is it feasible? How long will it take? As I said before, when you recognize, when you implement, and when will be the impact? Before we create state police, I'm sure you agree, you are a lawyer, it will take at least 12 months before you go around all the necessary listing and rest of them. But what can we do in the short term? Interestingly, in the Southwest, we have something that is called Amotekun. That is more or less a regional security outfit that is more or less homogeneous, that is more or less localized, as the case may be. So the government can say, let's work with South-South, let's work with Southeast, let's work with North-Central, let's work with Northwest and Northeast. Let's create regional security outfits similar to Amotekun. Where they are not getting it well, let's support them to get it a bit better, so that at least insecurity can come down. It will be owned by the people, and it will be controlled and managed by the people. Once we do that, we see how it will work. And before we now start talking about the issue of state police, there is no way, if you look at the current police we have now, are they functioning well? Are they being paid well? Are they properly trained? So if the federal police is not working well, how will the state police quickly start working well immediately? This will be controlled by the governors as the case may be.
Very relevant question. And I like the way you've linked the economy to politics and sociology. But before I let you go, let me ask about the Monetary Policy Committee, which is going to meet, we've been told, February 26, 27, which will be the first MPC meeting to be held under the leadership of Yemi Cardoso as CBN chairman. The last time the MPC meeting was held was in July 2023. Last year, it was postponed twice. Now, the president has sent names of chairman and 11 others for confirmation. What should we expect in terms of interest rate? The last time, I think it was 18.75%, right? Inflation then was about 21.82%. Now inflation is 30%. CRR, cash reserve ratio at the time, was kept at 32.5%. Liquidity ratio, 30%. Now it's a different country now. What should we expect? Tightening of rates, and what would be the implication of that?
No, I think that from the way things are going, seeing how inflation is going, seeing how the exchange rate is going, I think that the right thing, I think the CBN has already signaled that there's going to, maybe the rate will be raised. Because, of course, you know, the Treasury bills rate has already been raised.
That's true.
Which is indicating that this might be the direction to go. And even looking at inflation, the way inflation is going up, and the way particularly food prices, I think that the appropriate thing, and also because the money supply, as I said before, has grown by about 50-something%. I think that the appropriate thing to do will be to raise the rate a little bit, However, I also think, I've argued, I've said it before, the Naira redesign or Naira something that they did before was a good policy. I think it was wrong for the Supreme Court to intervene and say that both the old currency and the new currency, that all of them are now legal tenders. I think that in terms of controlling money supply, that it is important that the CBN looks at that policy again and see what they can do to still reduce money supply. Additionally, the issue of borrowing, that is ways and means, the CBN needs to clearly say that it cannot continue.
No, they've said, the CBN has said that
yes,
clearly.
Yeah, but of course,
no interventions.
But of course, we've just heard that they are still paying subsidy. So it's not about saying, it's about effectively ensuring that these policies has been announced, that we through follow it in terms of implementation. I believe that when they combine some of these policies, there should be a kind of moderation with regards to what is going on.
Okay, but the major challenge that we face is that there are no guarantees. In other jurisdictions, when they hike interest rates, at least you see the effect.
Exactly.
But here, we don't ever see the effect.
That's why I explained to you, Dr. Bati, that when you recognize a problem, you now say, okay, let's implement. And of course, there will be a time for impact and then outcome. The problem in Nigeria is that most of the time, before they recognize, 12 months is gone. Before they implement, another 8 months is gone. Before the impact comes out, you're under 12 months.
Development as attitude.
As attitude.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin Ngwu, for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday talk show.